Finding subcontractors, finding good subcontractors.
Yeah.
What would you suggest in that area?
Well, actually, you're in luck. Trent just walked in, and this is kind of something that he would be able to better answer for you. So if you give me
Okay.
1 second here. Hey, Trent, would you like to give Ted some tips here, Ted and Andrew, about just finding subcontractors as far as where to look, how to vet them, yeah, what you should be paying, etc.? Do you have like 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Talk real quick.
Here you go, Ted. I'll let Trent fill you in here for a second and give you some advice.
Good. Then I'd like to talk about supplementing afterwards.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, he does have a couple minutes, so.
Good.
How we doing, Ted?
I'm doing fine, Trent. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very good, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, so what I would suggest, does Andrew got a couple relationships with some suppliers now?
He's got a few. But the interesting thing, he's got a relationship with Richards up in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
And we have a few contracts in Milwaukee, and that led him to one subcontractor who's kind of pricey.
Okay.
He's got relationships in the Chicago area, but currently the relationships I think are up north, and he's actually working the south suburbs.
Okay.
So I don't know how well that works out as far as getting subcontractors. He picked up a subcontractor. I don't know how familiar you are with the Chicago area, but in Aurora, which is a west suburb.
Okay.
And he's working currently in the Lansing area, which is far south along the Indiana border. So that's a little bit of a. So he'd like an extra. He'd like some extra dollars for that long trip across the town.
Okay.
So the concern is, hopefully we'll make some profit. If nothing else, we'll get some visit. We'll break even and hopefully make profit. But the question is, and we'll get some visibility out of it. But going into next year in the spring season, we definitely want to be more cost effective.
Absolutely.
So what should we do to develop the right set of subcontractors? And another question as part of that is, at what point in time do you feel that it should go from subcontracting to having your own staff, your own crews? So it's a two-part question.
Yeah, when it comes to having your own crews, I think it would really depend on the volume of work. I mean, you would really need to make sure that if you're going to have employees, that you have enough work to keep those employees busy just about every day, and then make sure that you can get your, the pay. You'd have to really just break it down to, how much you would expect to have to pay each guy.
Sure.
And how much volume that you would need to do to justify that. And then if you take on employees, your workman's comp insurance is going to be about 30% of what your payroll is. So if you have a couple guys that are, making $100,000 a year, not each, but if you're paying your crew $100,000, you're going to have an additional $30,000 in insurance that you're going to have to be paying.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of more utilizing subcontractors in this line of work than actually developing and hiring your own crews.
Okay.
But that's going to be something that is probably going to be a ways down the road for you guys. I would imagine that your plan this year should just be to focus on developing some good subcontractor relationships. So what I would focus on for subcontractor relationships, if I was going into a brand new market and I didn't have a lot of contacts, is I would first go and talk directly to the suppliers in the area that you're doing your work in. There's going to be some roofing suppliers in that area.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever supply houses that you can find in that area, I would start by going and asking them if they have any, say, hey, look, what I would do is I'd position and say, we've got a little extra work. We have some crews, but we've got a little influx of some extra jobs. Do you know of any crews that we might be able to call to pick up a few extra jobs here and there? And they
Sure.
might be able to give you some contacts. And then going back to the conversation that I had with Andrew the first time that I spoke with him on the phone, is I would also recommend on the nice days, driving around the area that you have your contracts in, and see if
Mm-hmm.
you can find some roofing jobs going on. And then just go directly to the job site and see if you can talk to the foreman and ask him, hey, who's the boss here, and are you guys looking for some extra work? Most of your subcontractors, if they're halfway decent at what they do, they should have a price list for you.
Yeah.
And there should be, if you talk to a handful of guys, you should be able to start narrowing down, what kind of fair market pricing is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar with your market, but in our market, it's $55 to $60 a square. And I think I sent Andrew a price sheet from one of my subcontractors.
I believe you did.
Yeah, so you'd want to review that, and that pretty much encompasses all of the different things that they're going to charge for.
Mm-hmm.
So, you would start with your, base per square price removal and replace, and then figure out what the steep charges are and what the two-story charges that they charge are, if there's any dump fees or anything like that. And then you should have a pretty good idea of what that market will bear.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you kind of have an idea of what the market will bear, then you can start kind of negotiating. And at the same time, the way that your organization is set up currently, to do, to pay a few extra dollars a square shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Mm-hmm.
If you're paying a couple bucks more per square. And I'm of the philosophy that I would rather pay a little bit more for a good crew than to just get the cheapest one out there, because you usually get what you pay for. And
Right.
if a couple extra bucks a square, if you're looking at an average house that's 25, 30 squares, I mean, you're talking $50 to $60 a project, and that's worth the peace of mind for me to know that. So so what I would do is, in kind of an order, vendors, suppliers, talk to your suppliers and your vendors, drive around the market that you're serving, see if you can find some crews that are working. If there's a Lowe's or a Home Depot, the thing about it is, a lot of the crews are going to be Hispanic, and those guys, maybe they do landscaping, but they might know somebody that does roofing.
Mm-hmm.
And any crew relationships that you have, it's just about constantly asking the question: who do you know who do you know that does roofing? Who do you know that has a roofing crew? Or who do you know that manages a few roofing crews? So anytime you're having an interaction with, maybe you've got somebody that does some siding for you, and ask them, hey, who do you know that does roofing that does a good job?
Yeah, most of our stuff is siding, so I'm going to ask you what your price. Where would you go on pricing for siding?
Siding per square, we're typically going to be, I think in this market, we'd be looking at $90 to $100, $110.
Okay.
And that includes, it's typically going to be about $90. What's up, Andrew? It might be about $90, and then $10 for your house wrap or your insulation.
Mm-hmm.
And then typically what we pay for fascia and soffit is around $2.50 a foot.
Mm-hmm.
Or actually, I think it might be more like $1.50 a foot. It could be anywhere from $1.50 to $2.50 a foot on the soffit and fascia.
Okay. Okay.
And then window wraps. I think I sent Andrew some prices for our siding prices as well. So you'd be looking at typically $35 to $50 per window wrap. Maybe $50 for a door. Those types of things. In fact, I know Becca's mentioned that you guys are wanting to get some coaching on the kind of the back end of the business operations.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like to do is maybe next time you guys have your call, I'll just go ahead and do the call with you, and we can really spend some time talking a lot about that type of stuff. And then also doing Craigslist ads. Put a Craigslist ad out looking for a roofing crew.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then if you want to vet a crew, ask for references. Ask, let me see some of your work. One of the things that I've always done is before I give a crew a job, I want to try to find out like, hey, where's a job site that you're building, and I'm going to stop by while you guys are doing the job and just kind of take a look at how you guys operate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good way to vet them. And then just knowing how the stuff goes on yourself is really important. So, because if you want to make sure that you know how it goes together, so that way you can verify that it's going together, and then it's always worth taking and then when it comes down to it, I always just, whenever I give a guy a project, I'll give him a small one.
Mm-hmm.
I always start somebody out with a small job and make sure that they do a good job with that, and then we kind of build up from there.
Okay. How many different? Do you go through a lot of different crews in a season, or have you gotten sort of a group that you work with?
Yeah, we've gone through some. That's kind of just it's part of the game. You're gonna have some, and the crews, they got their own sets of issues. We just recently had a crew that we were working with for like a year, and they did a fantastic job, and we really didn't have to worry too much about them. And then for whatever reason, they just kind of got into some trouble. I don't exactly know what happened, but they weren't, we weren't getting the communication that we'd normally been getting. And so we reached out to some of our suppliers and got a new crew, and we actually had to go through a couple crews to kind of get one that we felt comfortable, moving forward with. And it's just kind of part of the process. Just like you're going out talking to homeowners and building relationships, you're going to do the same thing when it comes to the crews. And we got a couple of recommendations for some crews, and we reached out to one, and then we had a little dialogue going, but then they kind of fell off the face of the earth. So they weeded themselves out there, and we've had crews that we gave one job, but it wasn't up to our standards, so we just never gave them a job after that. And it's kind of part of the process.
Okay, very good.